This episode includes discussion of child sexual abuse material, and online child exploitation. These are difficult but necessary topics for us parents to understand in order to protect our kids. Please listen with care. Apple's marketing is genius, and they've convinced us that choosing their products for our kids makes us responsible parents, that an iPhone is a safe phone, and that parents have a lot of control. But when it comes to kids, safety is unfortunately an illusion. Welcome to The Heat is On, an investigative series by Scrolling to Death in partnership with the Heat Initiative. I'm Nicki Petrossi, host of Scrolling to Death.
And I'm Sarah Gardner, the CEO of the Heat Initiative, and we are here to turn up the heat on big tech. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, a caregiver, or just somebody who cares about our kids, we're going to give you the tools, facts, and the fire to push back on big tech and finally create the world that they deserve and we deserve for them to be safe.
Today, the heat is on Apple.
Apple was founded in 1976 when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built the first Apple computer in a California garage. In 1984, the Macintosh revolutionized personal computing with its simple, user-friendly design. After a near collapse in the mid-90s, Jobs returned in 1997 and transformed Apple into the global powerhouse, launching the iPod in 2001, the iPhone in 2007, and the iPad in 2010. These products didn't just change technology, they changed childhood, putting powerful, addictive devices directly in kids' hands. In 2012, Apple began pushing iPads into schools, impressing upon us the need for an iPad for every kindergartner. 6 years later, in 2018, Apple introduced their parental controls called Screen Time, claiming to prioritize family safety. Yet, as the world's most valuable company today, Apple still faces mounting pressure to do more to match its innovation with real accountability for the safety and well-being of our children who are growing up with Apple.
So when we were prepping for this episode, I was shocked to learn that it's only here in the US that more people use Apple than Android. And actually, globally, there are 3 times more Android users than Apple. And 100%. I'm so curious, why do you think that is?
Well, it's so expensive. The rest of the world is actually why is this phone actually better than other phones? And the reality is other phones are also great. So they're like, why would I pay up the wazoo? In the US, I feel like the iPhone is sort of much more of like a status symbol. You as a working person, you want an iPhone. Kids want an iPhone because it's what their parents have.
So Apple's marketing a lifestyle, right? And parents jumped on board, adults jumped on board, and that trickled down to our kids as well. I mean, there's kids that get bullied when they don't have an iPhone or they have that green bubble when they're texting back and forth. But the fact is that today, I think this discussion is going to be tricky because today it's about 88% of teenagers have an iPhone.
In the US.
In the US. Apple's devices are in our schools. And so this is a conversation about what Apple could do better, what they're not doing, what parents need to know about Apple, but also understanding that this is tricky because most of us use Apple, right?
Yeah. One of the big takeaways today is going to be normally we are talking about apps, right? Mm-hmm. Social media, environments where kids are interacting with potentially bad adults who are trying to find them and do bad things to them, but they're also seeing really harmful content. And so the focus to date has been on the apps correctly because that is the environment in which the kid is. It's the most obvious place. But if you think about it and you pull back one step, what is the delivery mechanism of the app? And that is the phone and the app stores, which I know we're going to talk a lot about. And so this is about sort of pulling back the next layer and thinking about the devices themselves. What role do they have to play in keeping kids safe and drawing them into the conversation? Because for a long time, they're able to kind of hide behind, well, we're just hardware. We just make the phones, the devices. We're not collecting all of your data, and we're not, but there's a lot of nuance there. And Apple in particular has branded itself on privacy and keeping people's data safe and all these things. But a lot of those tenets don't transfer over to kids, right? Because yes, we want kids' data to be safe, but we also want kids themselves to be safe, and they need a different style and environment than adults do.
We push back on the social media companies so much because their number one goal is engagement and keep our kids on their apps as long as possible. When we talk about Apple, they have a similar business model. They want our kids on their phones as young as possible and as much as possible.
It's not just like the phone makes phone calls and then you like put it down, right? Like think about how many times a day you have to go to your phone to use it, right? That's all like screen capture time of you on the device that gives them more and more opportunities to keep you on the device. They profit from you staying on the phone, right?
And they're targeting children and they're trying to capture them in school with the iPad usage. But what we've found out over time is that these companies do very little to protect the children that are using their products. So we're going to take a second to listen to Chris McKenna at Protect Young Eyes, and he's going to talk to us about screen time.
Apple's devices are not designed for minors. I just tend to want to live in a world that the devices that I give to my kids at least thought about them. Most everything about the Apple ecosystem, whether it's Mac or iOS, is beautiful and elegant and precise. And the user experience is just magical at times. You're like, wow, I can't believe how great and easy and fun it just flowed. And those are never words that I've described or used to describe screen time.
That's what I hear from so many parents is they can't figure out the screen time situation on the iPhones or on the iPads. Like it's so complicated. They have to go through so many steps. It doesn't work. Kids can bypass it. And so why, if they have all the funding in the world, why can't they put more into making it easier for parents to use screen time?
It is the most brilliant minds. Like they could make a phone that self-identifies basically as like, I belong to a 14-year-old. And then my entire experience is curated around the fact that I belong to a 14-year-old. Doesn't mean I'm giving that data out to a bunch of different random people, but it could be blocking and accessing, and like it could almost be like behaving as a child, or like what would be best
You're
for a child.
anthropomorphizing.
Sorry. But that would be good
okay.
because right now it's an adult phone in a kid's hand.
Yeah.
And we need it if they're going, and there is such an opportunity for them to make a kid phone.
I know. I mean, that's going to be a takeaway, I think, all the way through this. I mean, so one entry point for revenue for Apple and for harm for our kids that kind of intersects is the App Store. And that is something that parents can have some control over, what apps their kids can download. We'll talk about if the age ratings are accurate and all of that. But what Apple tells us is that the App Store provides apps you love from a place you can trust. And they provide over about 2 million apps. I'm really interested in educating parents today here on how the apps get approved. Like, what is that process for an app to hit the App Store? And is there safeguards, like child safeguards within that process?
Let's talk about what the app review process looks like now. So from their own website, Apple says that every week, 500 dedicated experts around the world review over 130,000 apps. So we did the math on that, and that's 260 per person a week. It gets down to like a matter of a few minutes to review an app per reviewer. We've been on these apps. Your kids are on these apps. Like, the apps are not stagnant pieces of content. They're alive. There are different people on them at different times. You can go on and have a totally pleasant experience, and then 5 minutes later go on and have somebody asking you for nudes or having like somebody spread child sexual abuse material around. So the review, it's not enough time to be reviewing the apps. But beyond that, it's also maybe not even the right criteria because they're being evaluated for what the developer says they're supposed to be used for. Like, oh, this is a fun photo app where you get to like do this fun thing and da-da-da. And they're not thinking like, you know what? Other people are going to use that app to groom kids and get them to send naked selfies of themselves. There's a question of like how to even responsibly rate an app.
Right. So the app company itself is, when they submit the app, they're filling out like a check mark system of how much of different types of content that they are self-reporting that their app has. And then it's up to the Apple employee reviewer to verify that. But there's no third party involved. There's two companies that both profit off of that app making it to the App Store at the lowest age rating possible.
Well, and that is a perfect segue into where we've seen apps be like thrown up in the app store grossly misrated, right? So nudifying apps that are rated 4 plus or 7 plus, dating apps that are rated 4 plus, 7 plus. Like, why in the world would you ever have a nudifying app rated 4 plus? What 4-year-old is supposed to be using an application where they're like undressing people? Like, it's crazy. And it just goes to show how little thought is going into it.
We have parents all over the world trusting the age ratings, because that's part of the screen time settings, is you can say, I only want my kid to be able to download apps that are 4 plus or 7 plus. Is that the next one?
Yeah.
And it's like, that all means nothing, because these apps are getting through that are extremely dangerous or inappropriate that are still rated at these low age ratings, like the examples that you mentioned.
I could understand someone listening to this being like, well, okay, it's rated 16 plus or 12 plus. Like, why does that really matter? We've met and know parents who have relied on these age ratings in making decisions about letting their kid have access to the app. And unfortunately, we know parents who've lost their child because they let them download an app that was 12 plus, trusting Apple, trusting Apple's age rating, apps you love from a place you can trust, by which a kid was contacted by a drug dealer and asked, do you want to buy some drug, and the kid says, oh, maybe I'm exploring, and maybe I do want like MDMA or something, sells them a pill that is fentanyl, and that kid is now dead. So it does have real life repercussions. It's not just an age, like a number that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And if parents are given so few tools to protect their kids on these devices, on these platforms, they should work, and we should be able to trust them.
Yeah, you can't have them if you can't stand behind them. Otherwise, don't have them at all.
And we wanted to ask some experts more about these App Store ratings, ask them specifically, can we trust App Store ratings? So we're going to hear first from Chris McKenna again at Protect Young Eyes.
I believe parents should not trust the App Store and its ratings, because it all comes down to incentives. Everything with technology is incentives. We've been battling that with social media, and now we're doing that with AI. The same is true with the App Store. At the end of the day, Sarah, the App Store's incentive is to get me to download. That's really all it wants me to do. That's the bottom line. Whatever it will take to get me to download. It's not incentivized to make sure that I make the wisest choice for my child. It's not prioritizing information in a way that I'm presented with all the different ways in which my child could be exploited and enjoy, but exploited on this app. So it has a different purpose than I do when I come to the App Store. I'm thinking of my child, they're thinking of the bottom line, and can I get it downloaded? Because there's a financial incentive and all the other things that we could go into there. But bottom line, no. Always do your research. Always get other sources. Always look for more information, because what you're going to find in the App Store is not going to help you make the best choice for your kid.
I have one thing I want to say about this, which is another expert in the field early on said to me, in the App Store, when you think about where you see the app and you see the age rating, there is like that high up something about your children's privacy and data. They like give you a warning.
Right.
And equally in that exact moment should be a safety rating, a safety rating.
Yeah.
Alongside independent safety rating alongside like the privacy rating. Okay.
And just what I hear here is like, apps you love, okay, but this is not a place you can trust. Parents have to not only review what the information is in the App Store, but try the app ourselves as a child. Like, that's so much work. I'd rather just not give my kid access. We'll get into more of that later. But let's hear from Jonathan Haidt with The Anxious Generation.
Again, I don't think they're an evil company. I don't think their business model requires hurting children. But they own that App Store, and they are not running it safely for children. So they should change that tomorrow.
The liability lies with Apple in addition to all of the individual app companies to protect kids.
Apple has now come up with like 17 different mall analogies as part of their defense of the App Store. I'm serious. They're like, well, do you punish the mall where in the liquor store in the mall, you don't ask for the ID while you're walking in? Like, they're like trying to negotiate this in real time of like what their responsibility is. In my point of view, if you are funneling your users to your own App Store, because like something else that we should talk about is, and there was a lawsuit based on this, is that Apple is making you also as a user use their app store. They don't want you like figuring out or going and downloading it from other places. And they sort of scare users about that. So if you're driving all of your users to your own app store and you're saying you can trust our age ratings and you're making money off of it, then I think you're pretty damn responsible for what that age rating is, and like this, and providing a safety rating and being really thoughtful about what you put in there and who is able to download it.
It would be like there being only one store where you have to get all your goods and there's no other stores to go to, and that is my only option. And them providing, poisonous goods to me, or like things that I can't trust to ingest, so it's like, let's compare it to something like that. Not like there's 6 malls I could travel to and go to whatever store I want based off of my research.
Sometimes we weren't just horrified about what was in the apps themselves, but it was also what ads were in the app. So the app would be actually like maybe pretty benign, like some kind of like dress up this doll or whatever.
Yeah.
But then the ad was for like Viagra.
Oh.
Or something. Like something totally, so their ads were not matching. And so also they need to be able to like promise us that the ads that kids see in these apps are going to be fine.
Well, another example of 5th grader at our public school was using an iPad playing a math game, Geometry Dash Lite, the free version, during class, and an ad popped up with a naked lady, and it was an ad for a virtual AI girlfriend served in school through an app downloaded from the App Store on a protected device that the school provided. So yeah, there's like a lot that can come through.
I think the takeaway here should be the App Store is not a passive environment that gets to like tap out when it comes to kids' safety. It is one of the primary delivery mechanisms, and it is one of the supposedly sort of gatekeepers of what your kid could or should experience online. And so therefore, Apple, as the owner of the App Store, has a huge responsibility in making sure that apps are rated correctly and that kids are only gaining access to stuff that would actually be suitable for them, for their age.
We are going to move on to talk about iMessage because, our kids need to learn how to communicate with their peers digitally. That's a big part of our lives, right? And parents will allow the iMessaging or messaging through the iPhone called iMessage. And I think we assume that our kids are safe there because it feels like a safe and closed area.
One-to-one. A one-to-one communication.
One-to-one. Maybe we're approving their contacts, things like that. So, Sarah, can you fill us in? Like, are there threats within iMessage?
Yeah. So the first thing that you just said that's so interesting because it's part of the problem because people don't think of iMessage as an app.
Oh.
But it is a place that behaves like an app.
Yeah.
In that it is facilitating communication.
Right.
Like any other app that does that, WhatsApp, Signal. It's a one-to-one way to talk to each other. The issue with iMessage right out of the gate is because 80% of US teens are using iPhones, most of them are then communicating with each other in iMessage. And it is connecting them to each other, but it's also connecting them potentially to people who are harming them. And it's in an environment where they cannot get help because iMessage does not have a reporting button, unlike basically every other messaging platform that a sort of normal US teen would find themselves on. iMessage is the complete outlier in allowing for kids to report when something bad is happening to them. Kids are often approached by, groomed by, manipulated by people they know. And so these are people that would have your child's phone number and would be communicating to them directly onto their iPhone. So just because it's their friends or people that you know also doesn't mean that they're safe.
I mean, where I came into hearing about the threats of iMessage was more with predators on the social media platforms approaching a child and then bringing them to iMessage. Now, why wouldn't the predator groomer do that on the social media platform? Why do they prefer to bring them to text messaging?
Yeah. So this is a term called off-platforming, which is really important. So predators are smart and they realize that like sort of the more they hide their tracks or like create different tracks or avenues by which they can manipulate and message and create a conversation with a child that they're targeting, the better chance they have of getting away with it. And also like the child sort of feeling overwhelmed by the, like, you know, taking charge of that child's life, so to speak, and showing up in every environment that they're a part of. Predators will go on like Instagram, which we call the directory of kids, and like figure out which kids they want to target. They'll start a conversation with them there. But Instagram actually does do some level of sextortion detection, but also most importantly has the report button. But what you'll see with predators is they'll say, hey, can you give me your phone number? So the kid will give the person their phone number on Instagram, and then all of a sudden they pop up in a text message on the kid's phone. Hey, it's, you know, Bobby from Instagram, and now I'm over here talking to you on the iPhone. The reason that is so dangerous is now they have the kid's personal phone number. So they're just like following them around in their pocket. And also predators know that that iMessage is not going to warn this kid in the same way. Or more specifically, that kid can't report that person's doing it to them to Apple to say like, this bad person is doing this bad thing to me. I need to report this and get help. Part of Apple's defense of why they don't allow for reporting, or like sort of why it's this closed environment, is because iMessage is encrypted. And that is unique. It makes it more unique than some other places where kids message. However, there are other encrypted messaging platforms like WhatsApp that still allow for a user to report that something bad is happening to them in WhatsApp, to the company itself. So that the issue of like, because it's encrypted, we can't receive like a message of help from a kid is false in my mind.
You and I both know a lot of families who have lost their teenage boy to suicide after they were sextorted. And a lot of these kids were taken from social media to iMessage. And so I really started to realize how big of a role Apple was playing in this whole situation of kids being targeted and sextorted. And so I wanted to talk to Paul Raphael about this, and he's going to fill us in a little bit more on Apple's role in the sextortion epidemic.
We all know that, you know, social media is the main initial vector for targeting victims in sextortion schemes. Now, what happens there is sometimes these victims block the criminals on Instagram, they block them on Snapchat, or they're able to deactivate their socials. So that way the harassment stops there. However, these criminals have gotten smart, and very early on in the conversation, they will ask their target for their iMessage, their phone number. That way later on, if they do get blocked on Instagram, on Snapchat, or other social media platforms, the criminal still has that victim's iMessage, their phone number. And with that kind of gets their hooks really into these victims, which is a really scary situation, because the victims can block them on Instagram, they can block them on Snapchat, they can deactivate those social media accounts pretty easily to stop the harassment. But it's actually much, much more difficult to try to stop that harassment once they have your phone number. The criminals use, different iMessage accounts, different iCloud accounts to send repeated, inundated messages to these victims, harassing them, threatening their life, threatening to ruin their life, threatening to expose them to their school, their friends, their family. And what kind of makes this whole thing even worse is the fact that iMessage does not have a proper reporting system for victims to notify Apple or iMessage that something bad is happening here. Unlike all the other social media platforms, unlike all the other internet-connected messaging platforms like Messenger, like WhatsApp, they all, even Telegram, has buttons to report bad activity, criminal activity, but iMessage has nothing.
Why wouldn't they have a reporting button?
Because imagine the onslaught of reports they're going to get from kids the minute they turn that thing on.
But those are kids that need help.
Yeah, but they don't want to be a part of the ecosystem, because then that all of a sudden creates an entire wave of work that they're avoiding right now. Then they are all of a sudden making reports. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, more lawyers are coming after them to get information when these cases are prosecuted. Like, they are avoiding all of that right now by being like, We have nothing to do with what's happening here. And we will do the absolute bare minimum, which is like we'll warn. They have that warning system in iMessage when it detects nudity. Like, oh, do you really want to do this? Like, proceed, don't proceed. So there's like a speed bump there, but they don't. It's not easy then to just say like, I need to report this person, they're harassing me. And something I would encourage all the parents listening to do is please go on Paul Rafael's LinkedIn and look at some of the screenshots from iMessage of when these perpetrators are sextorting these young boys. Just to be clear, sextortion can happen to boys and girls, but there has been this sort of like targeted crime network that has gone after boys of a certain age specifically. And when you read the actual messages and they count them down, like, if you don't give me $600 now over Venmo, I'm going to send like the nudes to all your friends. And then it's like 60 seconds, 50 seconds, 58. And you're just like thinking about this boy sitting there thinking that their life is over because they've promised their mom that they would never do this. And now there's so much trouble and they end up taking their own life. People often ask too, like, well, how did these kids fall prey to sextortion? So I think it's really important to mention that a lot of times in sextortion cases, it's a girl who contacts the boy.
Right.
So they think like a 16-year-old girl and they'll be like, oh, I just moved into this town, and they find out the name of their school. I'm going to be starting at your school. Like, I really need friends.
And they have mutual friends. This scammer has already added their friends.
And then they get a naked photo. They send it first and then entices the boy to send his. So he thinks he's interacting with a peer, obviously not. And that's how this whole thing unfolds so quickly and so devastatingly, is that he's likely promised his parents he won't do it. And then it happens, and then they're extorted for money.
This is one of those situations that we just have to talk to our kids about. You know, if we do happen to share a nude image online, like, it's okay. Come to the parent. Do not pay them. I will help you. Report it to law enforcement. Take screenshots of everything. You're probably going to have to deactivate their account. I mean, this is something that you can help them through, and hope is not lost if they find themselves in this situation.
Yeah, something I tell my kids about this, obviously they're not on social media yet, but I'm already putting this idea in their head of like, if something happens, like, you have to, I will not be mad at you. Just come tell me, because these kids, it gets very small very fast. My whole life is going to end, and then they're driven to suicide.
And so these images that are shared sometimes on social media, sometimes now through iMessage, now they're up in the iCloud, correct? And so that's why we need to start talking about iCloud, because images that are shared back and forth, or even taken on your camera roll, are often uploaded into the cloud, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole reason we started the HEAT initiative is because there are millions of images and videos of, unfortunately, of children being sexually abused that are shared all over the internet, and then they are allowed to be stored in iCloud. That seems crazy because they're illegal images. So why is a tech company allowed to store illegal images, make money off of storing those images and videos?
That's what I want to dig into a little bit, like breaking down what's actually happening and what Apple could do. So we're going to move now to talk about iCloud and child sexual abuse material, which is a really tough topic. When I was prepping for this, I reviewed HEAT's website, and there were some titles on there, and I'm going to read them. This is going to be tough to hear, but 646 child abuse images stored on 28-year-old's iCloud account. So these are news headlines. Child sexual abuse videos documented over several years found on iPad and iCloud. 2,902 abuse images and videos of a 5-year-old found on an iPhone. And so what you know well is that these predators are using the iCloud to hide CSAM, that Apple has the power to detect it and remove it, but does not. And so I know that there was conversations with Apple, statement made back in 2021 regarding this. Can you talk about that and like what happened from there?
When you learn about this tragic issue and you're introduced to places like the dark web and so forth, where people can store it because no company like owns that real estate, so to speak. So then you think, okay, well, in the dark web, we're like fighting it tooth and nail, like how can we get these sites down, et cetera, but there's no one to go to. So the open web should be a place where we can just fully eliminate all of it, no problem, because here you have like responsible tech companies that are of course going to do the right thing and detect known child sexual abuse material and not allow it on their platforms. And this was at my previous life and work at the organization I worked for 10 years. It was like approaching these tech companies and saying like, will you take it down? And most say yes, and like, or even are already taking it down. Mm-hmm. Apple was saying no. They were like, no, we're just going to leave it there. So that seemed appalling. And to your point, in 2021, I think they finally realized like that was not an answer that was going to work. And so they announced that they would take the step of detecting known child sexual abuse material, which was like really well received within our movement. And by survivors are thinking, oh my God, like, can you imagine they're going to take this step? The titles you just read at the beginning, like all those would be found and detected and taken down right away.
Right.
And for a whole lot of reasons, they ended up not moving forward with that solution. So it remains that those images and videos are there and they're not taken down. And I think the point I want to emphasize is that Apple is profiting off of hosting illegal child sexual abuse images and videos in iCloud. And I just, for the life of me, like can't understand, A, how they just live with that as themselves morally, but also like how we as a society are allowing like the most powerful per se tech company in the world with the reputation that they have to allow them to do that.
And think of all of the victims in the last 4 years of child sexual abuse material who've had their imagery stored in the iCloud and reshared elsewhere on the internet, that we could have avoided all of that trauma.
Yeah, it's such a tragedy. And also if you think about if Apple did their part detecting it, it would stem the tide of these images and videos also getting uploaded into all these social media apps. So you'd be like getting rid of it at a level that is much more like systemic and impactful than also whack-a-moling it across all apps, which it also needs to be detected there too. I also just want to give like 2 human real life examples of why this matters. So there have been cases where by way of other applications reporting a user who was sharing child sexual abuse material, the law enforcement gets wind of a certain person, they go arrest that person. Turns out they have all Apple devices. So again, if Apple had been detecting, they probably could have been found way sooner. And then in some of those instances, that person themselves will be abusing a child. So the detection isn't just like detecting them because this is their predilection and they're storing it and saving it and collecting it. Sometimes those people are also abusers, and you can actually get to a child who is in a bad situation and remove them from that situation. So like, again, like the real life impact of not detecting it is so profound and cannot be ignored.
So bad.
It's really bad.
The worst. And like, this is the worst thing I could hear of a company saying no to. Is it a revenue issue? Like, are they gonna, because they make money off of all the images stored in the iCloud. Is it a liability issue? I mean, it's all of the above.
I think it's an avoidance issue, meaning they are trying to avoid getting involved. And in these cases, and again, right now, they don't have to spend much money on it. They don't have to have review teams. They don't have to get dragged into the legal cases prosecuting the bad guys who have it. They can avoid all of that it's like the see no, hear no, speak no.
Right.
That is the Apple mantra.
And they want me to give my kid one of their phones?
Yes.
Like, this
in
is
fact,
crazy.
I would actually say their mantra is like, you do you, including if you're doing bad shit.
We'll do us and be billionaires.
You do you.
I think someone might come back with, well, that's my private iCloud account and I don't want anyone scanning it. What if I have a picture of my child in the bathtub and they say, oh, that's child sexual abuse material? Like, can you speak to that? Is that a valid pushback?
Yeah. So like the first answer to that is it's not a scan, it's a detect. So it's not like Apple is going through and like clocking each of your images and videos. they are detecting fingerprints. If they did it, they would be detecting fingerprints of only known child sexual abuse content.
And by known, you mean images or videos that have already been reported to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. That they have that fingerprint, and Apple can take that fingerprint, scan without seeing any content at all. Apple can then detect without seeing any of your private images.
100%.
And what's their excuse?
Their excuse is that once they start doing that for this, then people will come to them and say, now detect for this kind of imagery. Now look for these bad photos. Now, like, it just opens the floodgate of the slippery slope of things they're going to be asked to detect for.
But it's illegal. Like, illegal content, shouldn't they?
Right. That's the rational response back. Yes. Also, just to be clear, like, people are like, it's my own personal iCloud account. Fine, but that iCloud account sits on a server that Apple owns and runs. That's like Apple's space, right? It's space you're renting from them, but they're allowing it to stay there. Mm-hmm. I actually don't believe that, like, if you had a device that was not connected to the internet and you were storing CSAM on it, like, that sucks and it's horrible, but there is no way to detect it.
That's on you.
Right. This is connected to the internet on a server that they operate and run, and they're already evaluating those images and videos for whether they're spam or other things. They're kind of pretending like we're not seeing anything at all ever. Mm-hmm. But, like, think about even the way iPhones work. Like, everybody's categorized on your phone by face.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they're doing other functions on your images and videos. They're just saying, this one we won't do.
Right. That's really interesting. And I want to make a note that's important here. What I learned from you is that, say there's a known piece of CSAM that has been identified on, the dark web or a porn site, and it's been taken down. The problem with it still being in the iCloud is now this victim can still be re-traumatized because now this person, this predator, still has their image and can re-upload it. So this image is being continually re-uploaded of re-traumatizing these victims. And that's the big problem with it still existing in the iCloud.
Yeah, I mean, a build on that is people use this material to normalize the sexual abuse of children. So by it still being out there, and actually I've heard this from survivors themselves, like, one of their greatest fears is that their abuse of them is being used to tell someone else, this is okay, like, this is chill, like, it's okay if you are attracted to this. Like, can you make your own? Do you have a child in your life that you have contact with? Like, it's that dark. So it's not just like, it is the re-victimization of them. It's also an active bad thing that can be used to normalize the abuse of kids. But the other piece of it that's important to say is that these survivors are recognized by people. So the Canadian Center did a report talking to survivors, and I think it was like 30 to 40% of them, it could have been more, had said that they had been recognized on the street by someone, and, like, in the back of their mind, they're like, oh my God, that person knows me from my abuse imagery.
Horrifying. So sad. And I think to illustrate this, I want you to talk a little bit about the reporting, because these companies like Apple, social media companies, they're required to report content to national organizations. And can you talk about how many cases Apple's reporting versus some of these other companies?
Yeah, I mean, for years it'll be like Meta's reporting in the tens of millions, Google's reporting in the millions, X's had been reporting in the millions, Microsoft, all these companies, and then it gets to Apple, 252 reports. So when it's, to your point about how popular, Apple is in the US, when you think about all the people using phones, all the images and videos going around on Apple devices, they're saying 252 times as opposed to Meta's 16 million. It's pretty clear that they're just not doing anything. It's not that it's not there.
So with Apple having done nothing over the years to protect these victims, their child sexual abuse material is still in the iCloud. They have sued Apple, seeking more than $1.2 billion in damages, arguing that they abandoned their 2021 system to find this abusive material. So you want to talk about that lawsuit a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, here's what I want to talk about. When Apple came out and said, we're going to detect child sexual abuse material, right? and then said, we're not going to do it, that's advertising to people, hey, come here to store your child sexual abuse content, right? So the survivors who are in these images and videos are also now like saying, well, that's like direct harm to us, right? Because you are essentially like admitting that you know that your product is doing something illegal or allowing this illegal content to be there.
You enabled
it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the lawsuit has a ton of intricacies and is really complex, but at the heart of it, it's about your reaction earlier, which is like, how appalling is it that Apple is like knowingly storing illegal images? And I'm going to get a little graphic here just for a second, because I think it's really important, like, of toddlers, some of which are toddlers being raped. Like, how can you stand by that? How could you not remove that off of the iCloud and say this person doesn't belong here? That's crazy. That's the soul of what this lawsuit is.
Deep breath. On part 2 of The Heat is on Apple.
I believe that privacy and protection can live in the same space. Those are not mutually exclusive ideas.
Apple is the best situated company to solve the problem of kids online.
Well, right now, anything is better than nothing. And we see that big tech is unable to police themselves.
Especially to parents who are making decisions about whether to buy their phone for like their oldest kid now. Delay.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of our conversation about Apple. In our next episode, Sarah and I discuss how Apple's privacy features and child safety can coexist, ways Apple could step up to protect children on their devices, and actions parents can take today to help make a difference. All of that on the next episode of The Heat is On.